before I start, just an expectation set. I did say that you might become rock stars by the end of this. Can't guarantee it. Can't necessarily guarantee it. I might have oversold that a little bit, although other sessions were doing it more in my defence. But you know, we'll get you as far along the path to being rock stars as we possibly can. It's such a big topic, and I know probably every one of you have come here with a different idea of in your own mind as to what you want to get out of this. So please, at any stage, if you have an area that you want to drill down into or talk about, we've got some Q&A at the end, but if you just want to raise your hand and say, do you reckon you could dwell on this a little bit further or drill into this a little bit further? I've got more presentation slides here than I should. I've spent more time mucking around with them than I should. So take advantage of that. So if there is something that I haven't covered, even if I haven't covered it, and there are some things that are, I suppose, obvious by their admission, and if you want to bring them up in Q&A, or like I said, just flag them during the course of the presentation, please sing out and do so. Not big on lectures, so interactivity is great as well. So I'm not sure what the other sessions have been like. I've been to a couple, and it's been more, I think, probably classified as heckling, but you know, heckling is fine as well. Got a couple of live demos, which will always be interesting. Should be okay. We even have a video if I skip through my slides too quickly, and that's an interesting. It's a bit retro. It's actually all the way back to 2006. This video comes from, so that might be familiar to some of you and less so to others. It's more in a futures or a back to the future almost type discussion. Just a minute more. A few more seats right at the very front. There's no prizes, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Other than rockstar status, maybe questionable rockstar status. We didn't have any rockstar notaries in the house, so we can't necessarily stamp it, but we'll see how we go. Exactly. I think we'll, it's 1 minute past 1:45, so we'll kick it off. Give people a bit of a few minutes, or a minute grace, I suppose. Thank you very much again. I mentioned a little earlier, thank you very much for turning up today. Appreciate it. Meeting room 9, right down the bottom, smallest room. But a small room with a very, very big topic. And in actual fact, I think identity matters and digital identity is one of the key aspects. And it's pretty much all I do and all I have done for many, many years. Interestingly, and as a bit of a segue, 6 months ago, we had partner conference here, and I was lucky enough to get an hour in a room with James Kavanagh from Microsoft, who's now the CTO. And we were sitting in there looking at each other and going, I think more people should take identity seriously. And there should be a little bit more interest than just you and I. This was an open session that I was in with him. I think there should be just a little bit more excitement, a little bit more interest, and a little bit more focus on this area. It's a very important area, and I think some of that hopefully is reflected obviously by your attendance today, so thank you for that. And also, I'm hoping to certainly paint a picture on how those different aspects of digital identity are covered with the Azure stack and potentially some other capabilities inside of Azure and the IDaaS offering that Microsoft provides. So a little bit of background. It's an awful photo, Phil. I did that for you. Phil Whips, thank you. So I am, like I said, a lifelong identity and access management guy. I started off with Novell in the late 90s. That was a baptism by fire, obviously, late 99. And we had to get everything right. And it was an interesting time. So that time passed. But a lot of the fundamentals with respect to the complexities around digital identity and the traditional identity and access management solutions that are in place. I got a very, very good grounding there in that area. Moved to Microsoft a little while after that. Spent 6.5 years at Microsoft. Spent quite a bit of time up in Singapore in region in a time zone role for originally Live at EDU. Show of hands, anyone that knows Live at EDU? Okay, live to tell the tale, Phil. So I was one of the deployment engineers or deployment architects that went out and spruiked Live at EDU and all of the identity pieces and obviously built a lot of the glue at customer sites to get them to the cloud. So obviously the imperative was to get these people up into the cloud. Digital identities, it was a very new thing. We came across countries that had no central records, everything from 50,000 Excel files I think we were given at one particular site. So that was another baptism by a slightly different fire. In the most recent, my most recent incarnation, I've been doing mobility in cloud and most recently, I suppose, digital transformation and how that unpacks to digital identity and the implications. And obviously, being from an ex-Microsoft background, bringing my experience and contacts and I suppose scars, I guess, in a way, to digital identity challenges that we have currently. So the sorts of things I'm looking to cover are enterprise identity, which is that traditional identity, internal identity and access management. We'll touch on that. We won't spend a lot of time on that because obviously we're talking more about Azure IDaaS. But we do have to, I suppose, give that a little bit of time. Business to business, which is all about partners and customers. So how we can go about facilitating access, controlling access, providing step up verification of identity flows, those sorts of things to our business partners. And then customer and citizen, or citizen and customer identity, which is something that obviously as part of digital transformation also resonates. And it's something that we have spent quite a bit of time working on in the recent past. Digital transformation, well, it's a buzzword, but obviously it attracts a lot of interest and a lot of attention and a lot of money. And there's some things that, in the digital channel world and that digitisation and that move to cloud, obviously there's some things certainly that in the enterprise space at least that need to be sorted out before you can move successfully to the cloud. And I think you probably all had some experience in that space. Hands up who's seen this slide? Hands up who's sick of seeing this slide? Okay, well I've got another slide. So I've got a slightly different one. So this is all pretty well understood, but it's an interesting take. And I think if you look pretty much on SlideShare or YouTube or any of those, or TED, I think this slide makes an appearance. Not sure if it's copyright status, but it certainly makes a regular appearance in those slides. So there is an enormous amount of, like I said, attention and interest in digital transformation. I suppose my challenge was how do I make that, which is the thing that's topical, translate to digital identity and then into products, in effect, or solutions with capabilities. Because that obviously, otherwise, it's a little bit irrelevant. So we're kind of leading with digital transformation. There's been a couple of others. I haven't mentioned distributed immutable ledger yet, but I'm bound to. I don't know if any of you have been to any of the blockchain sessions. I think there was one on just gone, or just on now? Just on now, okay. So maybe I'm pitching to the wrong group there if that's the case, because they're probably down the road. But interesting stats. So the fastest growing currency last year, Bitcoin, 36.5%. And largest crowdfunding venture was for a virtual organisation on top of the Ethereum blockchain. And it was $180 million in 4 weeks it raised. Didn't put up there that it then got hacked and they got $50 million taken from it, but that's the interesting little story that we can have at the end of the Q&A perhaps. So like I mentioned, decoding the meaning of digital transformation. It boiled down for me, and it certainly seemed a lot of the people that I'd spoken to that work in this space, it was around the 4 main tenets there, which is customer engagement. That's just all about digital channel, as I mentioned. And also the need and the drive towards providing personalised services. So it's all that analytics, it's the BI, it's the big data pieces, and being able to provide the right services. I think there's at least one online retailer that and another company that supports an online retailer that believes that they know what your next purchase will be. So that's a little bit scary and a little bit creepy all at once, but it's certainly the world we live in. Mentioned there before about employee and partner empowerment. Obviously there's more and more moves in that space around interacting between partners. I mentioned that blockchain piece there before around reducing and facilitating trade between these partners. Obviously there's a significant amount of interest and focus in there. Optimising operations, who doesn't want to automate? That's a pretty obvious one, isn't it? Everyone wants to automate, and there's again some fantastic sessions this week around automation and the sorts of things that automation can bring. I did see an example talking about operations where one of the investment firms replaced, I think it was around 600 traders with 200 engineers. So go engineers. See how that works out. And then transforming product and service delivery. So mobile and web engagement, and again, really just back to digital channel. So a lot of it's digital channel, and then obviously the next piece is this slide. So I take identity and digital identity and assurance of identity very, very seriously. This should be something I think everyone says always. I don't think people say it enough. I don't think people, this is not actually a quote, although it is in quotation marks. It forms the basis of a lot of the future discussions, or a lot of the rest of the discussion or the presentation today. So very, very important. And it's the basis of trade. I mean, digital identity, if you don't have the assurance around digital identities, then obviously you can't transfer value between people successfully and reliably. This is a bit of a grab for attention, this slide. I'll refer to this a little bit later on, but as I mentioned, without this verified identity, and that's really unrelated. There's actually, it comes up a little bit later. I'm just planting the seed around that. The thing that struck me the most was this quote down the bottom here about Australia having no clear strategic vision for digital identity management that would lower costs and reduce the duplication of process. I think we're all sick of having to sign up and having to provide evidence of identity processes and going through all those challenges time and time again, especially when in our earliest interactions, I suppose, at educational institutions, we've gone through that process already. And then we go through it again when we get a driver's license. We go through again when we go to high school or university. And we constantly go through this process. And there's enormous number of opportunities there for the reduction and duplication of those processes, and just to reduce the frustration levels with individuals. So as I mentioned, one of the things I wanted to try and do was map that digital transformation message with some technology, because that's obviously what we're here for. One of the reasons we're here. I'll get through these a little bit more quickly. So they don't always and necessarily fall that neatly into those categories. Obviously, I think you could probably put all of them in all of them, all of the products in each of those categories. But we have to have a place to talk. We have to have some sort of segregation so we can have a discussion that's meaningful. And I suppose that the categories that those products are in fit more closely with each of those imperatives. So there's obviously challenges with digital identity, and I think we've all seen the trials and tribulations of digital identity at scale in Australia. I think that's a 6-month period. There was much rejoicing 6 months ago, and then there's a little less of late. So I don't know if anyone here from any of the government, I probably should have asked, shouldn't I? Anyone here from DTA or DTO or no? Not going to put your hand up? Okay, you know what I look like, and I don't know what you look like, so that's going to go badly for me later, isn't it? But look, we've been following this with enormous interest, and this, I guess, underpins when digital identity isn't done right, I don't think anyone's experience is particularly, it doesn't delight, and it's not the consumer-driven experiences that we're used to. So, but obviously the difference between a good digital identity experience and a poor one is market, and obviously blocks digital channel and the uptake and all of the things that this digital transformation and digital disruption wave brings. Yeah. This is a pretty basic one, but for the people that are at the coalface, it sometimes helps. We do a lot of engagements where the challenge is that the problem seems insurmountable, and the questions are raised from the business about the integrity and the integrity of identity information on premise, and then if we take that to the cloud, is it just replicating what we currently have, the problems that we currently have? If our on-premise Active Directory, if we don't really have great control over the information that's stored, the things that we use to attest that someone is who they say they are in an enterprise space. So if I can change someone's telephone number and then become them during a session, I mean, there's significant challenges, significant issues in there. So in terms of articulating those problems and capturing those problems, obviously we encourage people that are, again, at the coalface in operations to try and talk a little bit more, elevate conversations, take it up a notch, just to try and make it a little bit more understandable for the business, a bit more palatable for the business, useful for the business. And obviously then one of the things that we get a lot of success with is taking that TOGAF, that enterprise architecture approach, where you're looking at capabilities and the sorts of capabilities that you need to do to get to where you need to be. So that maturity assessment of where you currently are, where you need to be, not where the best in the industry necessarily is, but where you need to be in order to get to the point where you've done all the risk mitigation, done all the pieces of work for compliance, all that other work that needs to be done, and then build a roadmap to get there. I mean, it all sounds pretty straightforward, but a lot of the time people get caught up and just don't take the time to do that. So I did mention we'd start talking about technology very soon. It's been 15 minutes, so we probably should. But don't forget policy and process. Obviously, that comes back to bite you ultimately. So direction from the business, direction from the people that I guess not sign the checks necessarily, but sign off on the risk. So Chief Information Security Officers, policy people, PCI compliance people. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges to face, and many can be overcome. And that conversation I had with James, we had a great session for an hour talking about compliance and policy and legislation and data sovereignty and those sorts of things. So there aren't too many questions that can't be answered. Policy and process. So now we talk about this umbrella set of capabilities, which is Microsoft IDaaS. And it goes by many, 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 many different names. So it's gone as Microsoft Online. We've got Azure Active Directory, obviously. B2B, B2C, B2E. Anyone know what B2E? If I had a prize, I'd hand the prize out for B2E. Yeah. So that's just your average everyday Azure Active Directory instance that backs Office 365 or CRM Online or any of those products. So yeah, if I had a prize. In a different way, this is kind of how Microsoft shows it on most of their presentations, and it looks a lot nicer, really. But doesn't cover a lot of the detail. So there's a significant, as you can see, there's a significant amount of detail in there. There's even some things missing. And again, if I had another prize, I'd give a prize for the two things that are missing. Actually, two recent capabilities. They're not GA, so in my defense, they're not actually general availability, so I haven't oversold the capabilities. But they're actually very important parts, and I do cover them briefly at the end. So we've probably seen that Azure Active Directory is the identity is the barrier, or identity is the control plane. Azure Active Directory, obviously, in this particular example, is the thing that enforces that and facilitates that. There's some wonderful slides that I've seen kicking about that show the castle and the assets, and then you walk around, or you did one view from the front, which is the big imposing wall, and then you go around the back, and there's nothing. So all of a sudden, that's that metaphor around that the assets aren't always stored now in the corporate firewall. It's all about the identity and the device and being able to secure both of those things. So this doesn't cover that endpoint protection piece, that information protection and device protection. There's certainly lots of other sessions on that, but it does, we're obviously trying to cover the identity pieces there. Okay, got that. So Azure B2E, Azure Active Directory. So this is again back to the enterprise discussion. The recommendation, as it is with most of the pieces now, it's all about cloud, and identity is no different. So we encourage and strongly encourage people to move identity workloads, and this doesn't necessarily always appeal to people. So I don't always, we're not always saying when we're saying identity workloads, we're not always talking about the identity. So we're just talking about the capabilities. So the self-service password reset pieces, the multi-factor capabilities, the conditional access pieces, the risk-based and context-based authorization and verification of identity processes, not necessarily the identity. It might be part of the identity, that might help. It might be that a username in the cloud, obviously to allow you to log in, is useful, but people's date of birth obviously can't go there. So there are all different, levels from having all of your identity and all of the identity information and credentials in the cloud and all the other profile information about that user up there to having nothing. And obviously, so there's certainly a continuum, and that's the case obviously with data as well, and applications. So identity is no different in that space. We certainly can have options, or there are options that exist in that space. So broadly speaking, around the enterprise identity space, so we talk about provisioning and access, and the access governance piece, and I've got a couple of little demos coming up, and user self-service, of course, so passwords, request approval flows, those sorts of things. That verification of identity flow. Anyone familiar with Azure Identity Protection and what that suite does? So it's an interesting and useful new capability that provides some of those, provides protection for applications and steps in between the application and the user, and does that risk and context-based analysis about whether that user should actually be getting to that content. And it can be multifaceted, so it can be, is the time right? Is the network location right? Is the device secured? Is it enrolled in Intune, for example? Does it pass compliance checks? Those sorts of things. Or, gosh, this user was, there's that geographic story around they're logging in from one place and then suspiciously logging in from somewhere else. Those sorts of characteristics. Or some of the more advanced machine learning and user heuristics that can come from these things around this user doesn't normally use this application. And you've probably seen some of the other workloads in the cloud, some of the infrastructure as a service pieces employ some of the advanced threat analytics and those other capabilities, employ some of those techniques and tactics to make sure. And obviously then, what do you do after you think that there is a suspicious activity? Well, maybe you ask the person for an additional factor. Maybe you block access, maybe you block and audit. Entirely up to you. More often than not, block, I think, would probably be the best course of action. I do have one little note here. So I don't know if you've seen, so one of the challenges with Azure MFA in recent times has been that it doesn't provide support for radius. Does anyone? Yeah, so that's a new capability now. So there is support for, it's not quite using ADFS, but it is using one of the other Windows services to provide that capability, because that was a big blocker. I mean, I would go and do a lot of work in that space, and it was all, can't we just use Azure MFA? But we've got radius, because of course that's how you integrate, that's how you do the integration. So now that's one of the things I just wanted to stop for a second and then mention that. So as I mentioned there again a little while ago around hybrid identity, being able to choose and pick and choose about where identity and credentials are stored, where profile information is stored. And obviously there's a few different, the security or chief security officers and those people that provide the risk-based decisions on where credentials can go and where data can go need to have a little bit more information, because they tend to be a little bit binary in their decisions sometimes. And I don't know if that's your experience, but it has been certainly mine. So where credentials are, obviously, is of significant interest. Where profile information is of significant interest. And where that information goes to. I don't know if you knew recently that the Outlook client on iOS actually went up, channeled credentials through AWS. That's not the case anymore as well, by the way, but there's some little tricks, and that to me didn't seem like a particularly good idea, and obviously to a lot of my customers it didn't seem like a particularly good idea either, and actually blocked the adoption of that. So where those credentials go is equally important as to where equally as interesting to some people certainly as to where they're stored and where they're cached. And there's even been changes in recent times with Exchange around not tunneling credentials and not doing basic auth at the back end, and not tunneling credentials and using more claims-based. So there's a whole obviously move towards claims-based authentication, which is fantastic. Has anyone seen or heard of either Windows Hello or WebAuthn or Fido? It's exciting as well, isn't it? Yeah? Okay, good. Just a little nod, that's all I need. Yeah, well, I find it very exciting, there is talk about this, passwordless experience for people, and that can't come soon enough. And then obviously those technologies support that initiative. So identities can be created and maintained in many different places. You're probably all familiar with cloud identities and Azure Active Directory, where you just go and create identities up in the cloud, and that's all relatively straightforward and lovely and not necessarily of great delight. There's been some improvements in recent times. I don't know if you're familiar with AAD Connect and AAD Sync. Show of hands? Yeah, okay, good. That's why you're low on energy today, then, if that's the case, because you've been playing with that recently. But there's been some great advances there. The password hash sync is fantastic. Show of hands, who loves password hash sync? Okay, so cloud identities and password hash sync, fantastic. So get around all those password complexity rules and all the other challenges that exist in that space. So that's a wonderful improvement. Mastering identities on premise, well, that probably is something that many customers still, and medium to large customers, I suppose that's probably, again, I've got to show of hands. So who does most of their, or who is either a customer and uses Federation, or has customers that do use Federation? Yeah, and that principally is to make sure credentials are on-prem, I'm assuming. Is that, yeah, okay. So partner mastered identities is a new one altogether, where you don't actually control the identity, the partner's identity. And then obviously there's that social, that customer and citizen case where the customer owns their own identity, either through a social provider or through some of the new self-sovereign identity providers that I'll also talk about a little bit later. So cases, really just cover them off around where credentials are stored and the relative strengths or weaknesses of each of them. I really like that. I really like that one. I'm hoping that kicks off. I know there's certainly moves for support for other platforms, not just Windows 10, and I think that can't come soon enough. Excuse me. Sorry, what was that? I think they might have alluded to something like that. Yeah, you're right. There's certainly challenges with that, because if you've got the device, you've got access. So, but hopefully in the next one they get around, or they work around that one, and we'll all learn how that will actually work better for everyone. So can't wait for the next movie. AAD Connect. There really kind of isn't. Oh, there are other ways. In fairness, there are other ways of doing it, but up until recently, I suppose there's been, in recent times, I should say that the products have come a significant way. We've done a lot of deployments with the Microsoft Online and the Office 365 connectors, the Windows WSOA, I think it is, connector in FIM and various other technologies, and there's improvements there also with Graph API. There are significant investments from Microsoft to provide unifying APIs across all of the services, not only identity, but also the Office 365 suite. And identity is just one of those I suppose, services under that umbrella. They've recently, and I'll talk about that in a second, around, is anyone using B2B here, Azure B2B? Yeah, so they've made some improvements. You've probably seen those recently around API integration and allowing for people to not have to upload CSV files. So all of a sudden you can provide that opportunity, or you can support that, or you can support automation for inviting partners into your organisation, into your organisational Active Directory. There's a couple of other, B2B probably is the other one that excites me a fair bit, so I'll dwell on that a little bit. So AAD Connect, I think we all know that it is probably the best choice. Again, like I said, there are alternatives, absolutely. There's some preview features coming that I've got written here that I can't talk about. But there are some features coming that will allow support. I'll frame this a different way. You've seen ADFS has recently brought on native LDAP support. I don't know if you've seen that. So now I don't have to have credentials inside an Active Directory or inside of Active Directory natively. They've now allowed me to stand up another credential provider or identity provider and point at LDAP, a native LDAP endpoint. And I think that's an area of focus. Probably six years ago, I stood up in front of product managers and said, I'm working in APAC. You know, Australia's kind of organised. They're good. They've got a lot of Active Directory and ADFS, and from an enterprise perspective, they're doing a wonderful job. New Zealand, Singapore, you know, they're all kind of okay. Korea's okay. The rest of Asia use LDAP, open LDAP, and how can I go and sell this solution? And obviously there are alternatives to ADFS in the market, but it didn't certainly at the time allow me to go to market easily. I know that a lot of you guys will probably have and continue to have a lot of accounts inside of LDAP directories. Maybe not just Active Directory, but LDAP directories. There's a lot of very, very large implementations, certainly, and like I was saying, inside of APAC, most of them were LDAP outside of those sort of big four countries. So that was a segue, back to the topic at hand. I think you probably should look for something similar, although similar sorts of advances in other Microsoft technologies, not just ADFS. So that opening up and making it easier, and obviously the imperative is all about making those provisioning activities and those tasks of getting users from an authoritative source of identity into the cloud as simple as possible. And you've probably seen that not only with the move from DirSync to AAD Sync and AAD Connect, but also ADFS. It's not quite next, but it is for the vast majority of customers, and obviously that's what Microsoft's been looking for, and we have all been looking for as well. Is anyone familiar with pass-through authentication? Isn't it fabulous? So this was another one of the discussions that I had many years ago around, gosh, look how some of these other vendors do this. They've got this little lightweight agent sitting on-prem, and they tunnel all of the authentication traffic back to prem. What a good idea. And 6 years later, it's happened. So I also had this coup. I thought, I've got this coup about talking about pass-through authentication. Spoke to the product manager, got permission. It's late last year, I think it was. Then it was announced, and that you'll actually see the date's December. It's February now, as you know. So stole my thunder a little bit, but obviously a super solution. Why is it a super solution? Well, you can see here of each of the identity solutions that are, I guess, in play from Microsoft's perspective. There's some significant complexity involved, and that's one of the things that Microsoft and partners obviously have been looking to reduce the complexity to get on board and to onboard onto services. And that's been the traditional curve where cloud identities are great, but they certainly don't fit the vast majority of cases. And AAD Connect and ADFS is is the most complex with hash sync PHS, the password hash sync sort of sitting somewhere in the middle. Again, not necessarily fitting everyone's use cases. So what can be done? Well, password authentication is a very interesting capability where, again, like I was saying, whenever anyone gets a credential, when it gets challenged for a username or password, sadly we're not quite at Windows Hello yet on this one, but whenever anyone gets challenged for a username and password, that gets tunneled back to Active Directory using Azure App Proxy. That's the underlying technology, if you're familiar with that. There's also a new capability that I think is GA, it was at least in public preview, where you can share Kerberos tickets. Sorry, you can set up a trust relationship there, I should say. We can actually get desktop single sign-on. I'm still amazed at the number of people that say we have to have desktop single sign-on. It pains me because I go to a lot of trouble to explain to them about BYOD and this whole thing about devices, and that most of their devices don't support single sign-on, and yet the business is so incredibly focused on providing it. And it's a significant investment and a significant step up in complexity for organisations, and sometimes it's a bit of a hot topic with me, and I try and make the case as objectively as I can, but it winds up being subjective in the end. But look, if you're considering the option between doing single sign-on and same sign-on, that's why I call it SSO, because then you can hedge your bets. It can be either. It's a really good option because of the cost. At least consider the cost and the complexity when you make that decision about desktop single sign-on, integrated Windows Auth support. So as I mentioned, this Azure App Proxy, they're all the components. So on-premise Active Directory with a connector. As I mentioned, nice and lightweight. It's a single agent running on a Windows server. So whenever anyone gets prompted for a username and password, and this can be if you federate from third-party SaaS providers or your own custom applications, if you federate with the Azure Active Directory STS as security token services, this applies equally. So these passwords and that single sign-on experience, or same sign-on experience, I should say, exists for those customers and all those applications.
Also, from less complexity wise, you don't need the app proxy. You can still use AAD connect as well.
Okay, good.
Good. So if you want it really uncomplicated, you can do it with just AAD connect.
Well, I've certainly worked, and I'm sure you have as well, worked with customers where one university in New Zealand in particular had a large exchange deployment, and all of the necessary components, wasn't federated obviously because of the lack of claim support at the time, moved to Office 365 and said we've got to federate, and we went away and did some sums and looked at their server sizings and loadings and said it'll be 22 servers. So they said we run our current environment on 16. And that obviously was moving all of the mail and just providing all of the provisioning and access management pieces, highly available disaster recovery. So they ticked some of the boxes that are the boxes that make life tricky. But obviously, to be able to do away with at least 2/3 of those servers, obviously there's still some provisioning pieces, and you'd want to have a disaster recovery plan for that, but that can be very easily achieved with active passive on AAD sync. To remove the need for ADFS or other access management gateways, and it's not true for everyone. There are certainly cases where ADFS is required, so some of the device-based conditional access pieces still require ADFS on-premise. But I guess it's a watch this space. This is really a 1.0 version of this capability. So back to this, tunneling credentials. What a great idea. Only it had been done 6 years ago. Never mind, apology. I feel like I'm somewhat responsible for that, so I didn't make the case well enough when I was with the product manager at the time. Demos. So, very quickly, cloud provisioning and access. So this is when we now start to elevate that conversation to, okay, well, you're talking about moving these identity workloads into the cloud. What does that actually mean, and what does that actually look like? How is that going to work for me? So when I talk about cloud provisioning, know if you can see that clearly. It's a little bit light, isn't it? My Apps Portal, which is the end user interface into this world. It also spans partner work because there's been improvements and enhancements recently to the My Apps Portal that allow you to be invited into a third-party Azure Active Directory and be able to access their SaaS applications through there. So you can be invited in, and that appears in the My Apps Portal now, whereas it didn't once upon a time. And then there's this application integration piece where Microsoft has spent the time and built the relationships with many, many different SaaS providers to provide, for the vast majority, provisioning, on-the-fly provisioning capabilities. And for a lesser number, but still a significant number, single sign-on capabilities also. So what that is doing, in effect, is taking the federation relationship and moving it from your from your premises and moving it to the cloud. And that's what I mean when I talk about migrating the identity workloads to the cloud. And that makes life a whole lot easier. I think we've all experienced, and I certainly have, and I know Monash has, amongst others, experienced situations where cloud providers change their interfaces, or they change the way you interact with their cloud services. Microsoft was able to, as an example of this, they change the way they interact, and then obviously your integration's broken and you don't get any warning, and it's all not a particularly good experience necessarily. Microsoft, and I don't know if you saw it, where Google in the not too recent past changed from SAML through to actually OAuth 2, their own OAuth 2 protocol to OpenID Connect. And Microsoft was able to say, can you just hold up for a second? We're not quite there yet. So they were able to, they had that, I guess, that connection and that opportunity to talk to one of these big SaaS providers and pretty much say, no, we don't want to break 1 million customers. We'd rather you just wait a little bit and we'll make the changes that we need to make so this change goes seamlessly. From what I've seen, customers obviously don't have that opportunity necessarily, and the level of investment in that area, and obviously the impact that can be major if you're relying on these cloud identities or federated solutions to access your either cloud provided applications or your on-premise applications. The impacts are enormous. So, you know, to be able to take that conversation and raise it to the enterprise level, the big player level, and have them sort those things out so you don't have to worry about it, seems like a pretty good idea. Is anyone using Marketplace currently? For more than 10 applications? I'm not doing a licensing check if you're wondering. Okay, per user, no, okay. So this is one of the, again, I'm going to highlight, as you saw that previous slide that spoke about the IDaaS solution, there's a lot of capabilities. I'm going to focus on just 2 or 3 of them because, again, there's not enough time to talk about all of them. But Marketplace is one of those hidden gems up in Azure Active Directory and in IDaaS that a lot of people don't take advantage of, don't know about necessarily, and don't take advantage of. There's a catalogue, I think, of 2,700 applications. I did that screen grab this morning, almost 2,800 applications that are, like I said, most of them are support provisioning, single sign-on, provisioning and on-the-fly provisioning and single sign-on. Some of them actually provide bulk provisioning as well. And there's even a smaller number, and by smaller number I mean 1, that allows for identities to be mastered in a SaaS provided application and fed back into Azure Active Directory. That's Workday. I don't know if anyone here uses Workday. Might be of interest. So, authoritative source of identities, not on-prem, not in the cloud, well, not in the Azure cloud, as it were, Azure Active Directory, but actually sitting in Workday and feeding credentials in. Yeah, well, you can do it either way. So, I mean, it will actually allow you to push credentials into there or allow them to be mastered in there as well. So, I think it's probably fair to say look for more of that. That was a very successful, was driven by a particular customer and a particular customer requirement, but look for more of that capability. There's also custom provisioning. So is anyone familiar with Skim? Phil, what is Skim? No. So there's been a push again and has its roots in the I suppose mid-90s or late 90s actually, around providing some standards, and again the jokes about standards, but there's been various attempts at providing cross-platform or open standards around identity provisioning and provisioning of user identities and group identities. And it's been going around for a long, long time. And finally, the industry has settled on SCIM, which is, which is the system for cross-system identity management from memory. Azure Active Directory brought on this capability, and I was ecstatic. And I get excited about simple little things, and I think it's certainly in the identity space, I get excited about these things. So all of a sudden, I was able to stand up a new application, custom application in Marketplace, a connector, if you will, have an account be provisioned into Azure Active Directory, and that triggered a provisioning event. And all I had to do was write a little SCIM, a little interface that would talk SCIM, and then allow me to go and provision accounts into other systems. I thought, how exciting is that? And I know that doesn't appeal to everyone, but it appealed to me. So that's my little thing. So that hadn't existed up to this point. You know, you could do LDAP binds and LDAP adds and all that sort of stuff, but that just doesn't work in the cloud world. So all of a sudden there was an open standard that I could write a bit of an interface, and there are plenty of vendors that have these interfaces, and then go and provision accounts elsewhere. Do groups, do access control, do user provisioning, those sorts of things. So what I'm basically trying to say with that is that you're not limited to that 2,800 give or take applications. Really, the sky's the limit. And as part of that custom capability within Azure Active Directory Marketplace, you can also provide the single sign-on capability. So I can also now, if my application took SAML, I can now accept SAML tokens and have Azure Active Directory sign, provide the assertions, and then the application obviously allow access if it's suitable. And I can also include all of the other capabilities, so conditional access and all the risk and identity protection pieces as well. Demo time. Oh, okay. I was late on my slide. Workday, which was my point around it being the ability, or the having, and it's the unique ability currently, but improving in the future, or expanding in the future around it, having that unique ability to master identities. All right. How does that look? How does it actually look? I want to go and create one or add one of these applications. That's number 8. Just be a moment while my Surface comes out of hibernate. Fantastic. So I asked the question before about how many people use Marketplace, but how many people know about Marketplace? And while I'm waiting for this to just boot, the objections, or are there principal objections around lack of application support, or what's the challenge, I suppose, with adopting it more widely? Is it a licensing challenge around the cost of the licenses, or anything in particular? Nothing that comes to mind, just hasn't appealed up until now? So I'm assuming that most of these systems that you connect to, then you either federate directly back to premise. Is that fair to say? Yeah, okay. Okay, B2B, C1. Right. So I have here in fact, I'll just change that. So here's something that's probably quite familiar to you. I've got an Office 365 tenant backed with Azure Active Directory. This is the admin user. So what I'm going to do is go through a process where I'm going to add one of those applications to the user, and it'll be a little bit there'll be it'll be a user with a twist and a service with a twist also. So we will go back and create a user. You can see this has been done before. So we'll give it a reasonable name. No, 9-9. Not the most wonderful. Give it some license. I could have done all this with PowerShell, and then I think probably next time around I will. Add that user. Copy that password. This is your B2B user, but that's a little bit misleading. So again, this is a live demo, so it's all very exciting. So please cross fingers or toes or whatever else needs to be crossed. Okay. Is it really? User 9-9. Yeah. He's not appeared. There we are. Yes. All right. Try that again. All right. I'll save that for the time being. So we have a user, which is good. So what I've done for this particular tenant is ask for the user, or enforced the enrolment of the user to multi-factor auth. So I'll ask for identity proofs at the start to make sure that this user doesn't, or if they do lose their account, they're able to provide. And that was one of the, they'll be able to obviously do that recovery through their phone, or also do the verification of identity flow as well. I'll get that text. 355 953 355 953. Now, I've only asked it to provide, I've only enforced the requirement to provide one of those, which is great. Or have I? Maybe I did both. Yeah, I thought so. I'm going to say cancel on that one. Be a bit naughty. Okay, so that's good news. I have a user. That's all relatively straightforward. I have now that app panel, which is, as I spoke about before. So this is that user's interface, that particular user in that particular tenant. They're the applications that the administrator, the SaaS-based applications or the Office 365 applications that administrator has provided access to. So nothing groundbreaking there, but what I am going to do is now skip into the Azure interface and provide this particular user access to Facebook. Now that might not sound interesting, and it probably isn't for most, but for companies that do have applications that, well, I should say accounts and social media accounts that need to have a certain level of control placed upon them, and not just have Joe in marketing logging in and doing things willy-nilly. So obviously that there's an amount of control that you want to be able to exert on that access for that particular person. So we'll just go in fact, we'll go back, and do enterprise applications. So what I'm going to do is assign that user access to Facebook. And I'm going to do one more thing, and that is assign a set of credentials that user will use, but they won't actually know what they are. So they'll be hidden to that individual. So that login will be protected. And obviously, so in the first instance, access is protected. No, that's not it. I have got Facebook in here. That's the reason. Wrong tenant, too many tenants. So we should find Facebook in here, if all goes well. I'll try logging in again, I think. That looks a bit suspicious. That's looking better now. So, the journey has wound up here. So I'll add that user. Or will I? Okay, I see what I've done. I've actually created the user in the wrong tenant. So I had two Office 365 Azure Office 365 instances. One's actually to do with B2B piece in just a moment. So there you go. How about that? Yeah, we don't want that. We'll try that again. No. And we'll give this user that same user in a different tenant. And we'll do B2B user, and we'll log out of this guy. That, and we'll log in with the real user. Which will make this demo and the next demo for that matter go a whole lot smoother. Okay, we'll just confirm that user has the applications in question. So that is the right place. Very good. Okay. So we'll add an assignment. That user now should appear. All things going well. There we go. So this is that checkbox that I was talking about. So assign credentials. So this is the point at which I say this account isn't actually owned by this particular user. This is owned by, and please don't use this password. can, or you can if you want, but you know, it's pretty dull. So I'll assign that application to that user and also assign those credentials to that user. So I've now provided that access. All going well. That application, after a couple of refreshes, just check to see, yep, will appear in their access panel. Here we go. Now when I access that, it should log in with those credentials. And there's some sketchy characters here. So there you go. Let's just expand that out and pretend for a second that we didn't see any of those things. So this user has no friends, and that's not really very surprising. But you can see what's happened is that user is actually, those credentials have been pre-filled into that login. There is actually an extension that's required in the browser to do that, to support that password post inside the browser, and it does do some level of protection of credential password changes and what have you as well. So that's not one of those marketplace, well, it is actually one of those marketplace apps. It's not one of the ones that I spoke about that does the automatic provisioning and the automatic single sign-on, but it is a password vaulting example. So this whole thing here is, or this example is all about showing that even if your applications aren't necessarily single sign-on enabled, you can take back control and you can allow people through that initial flow, they can save their own credentials, and then you can obviously, because you provided them access, you can also remove it. So for corporate accounts, for Twitter, for Facebook, for those sorts of things, it's a very, very interesting use case and a very, very useful use case. Is anyone using that feature currently to protect social identity accounts within their organisation? I'd encourage you to look at it because it is a very, very good solution. All right, so we had moderate success with that one. We'll try and get the next one better. And in actual fact, the next one is all about access governance. So looking at, again, the MyApp portal and accessing the SaaS-based applications. And this is back to that risk and context-based and conditional access capability that Azure Active Directory possesses and can enforce on application access. So let's just go over here. So you'll see again, I'll go to the right tenant. Admin C1, all applications. I have got SharePoint, for example. So what I've done in this particular example inside of conditional access, so this application obviously is made available to all licensed users for this particular tenant. But what I've done is, so that first flow, that first time that a user logged in, they had to provide their recovery credentials, but they weren't actually forced to use them. So not at any stage did I receive a text saying enter this 6-digit code as a part of the login process, as a part of that conditional access or that authorization process. But obviously I can enforce that. So on a per application basis now, we can actually support this. So for applications that are in the catalog for Office 365 and also for applications that aren't in the catalog but are custom applications, and I'll show you an example of a custom application as well. So I've got I think all users are this particular rule in this particular case is being enforced. So I'm going to prompt them for an MFA of challenge whenever they access SharePoint. And that's one of those users. And I haven't set it up, so I have to set it up for the first time. In actual fact, I can make this a little bit more interesting also. go through that registration flow. So you did see I did do it before, but of course I did it to the user in the other tenant. So that's why I've been asked on this occasion. In actual fact, that the policy in the other tenant is to do that registration in the first login, not allow a little bit more leniency, not just register, but register only in the other tenant. So I've got 212.462. Just wondering who's fast enough to type, who can actually hijack my my user there. No one? That's good. Excellent. That would pretty much render this demo useless, so thank you for not doing that. All right, we're successful. Hip, hip, hooray. So that's showing that conditional access capability. So now I've been challenged. I get access once I've gone through that registration and prompt for the credential, and life's good. I will go back and show you one other piece here. I mentioned briefly before around the extensibility of Marketplace. So just because an application isn't in Marketplace doesn't mean you can't provision to it. So if in actual fact I've mocked up an application here called Orion 11. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Orion, has SAML support, which is fantastic. So new capability that's been added to Orion 11. So in theory, with the right sort of technology, obviously accounts still need to be provisioned, and this doesn't cater for that because I haven't got, under the provisioning piece here, I haven't actually got that SCIM endpoint listening. But if I had that gateway service, then I could equally use that. But the single sign-on piece allows me, as long as that account's been provisioned, to then go and log in and access and take advantage of the conditional access, the information protection, all the other capabilities as well in that what would appear to be non-supported application. So that can be achieved by adding a non-gallery application. And you'll see here there's an explanation on what you need to actually satisfy. So SAML-based single sign-on, it also uses app proxy, so it can be an application that's running on-premise, for example, so you can tunnel that request back. SCIM as the provisioning method, and it'll also use password single sign-on, so it will be able to do that password vaulting that I showed with the Facebook example just before as well. Okay. So the theme obviously has been about uplifting workloads, digital transformation, get the things that you don't need to do off-prem, release that, remove that infrastructure burden in a safe and reliable way. Use cloud, use cloud, use cloud. You've probably heard that more than once this week, and it's obviously this discussion is no different. The next piece is about, well, we do want to do some uplifting of capabilities, but we've got these applications that still rely on NTLM or Kerberos, possibly LDAP, secure LDAP, those sorts of protocols, and how do we move those into a cloud solution? Because everything Microsoft's told us that around not doing this, not putting domain controllers in the cloud, and also the challenges that exist with VPN or direct access when it comes to bridging Active Directory instances between premise and the cloud. So there's challenges because that's really the only options that we have, but it's obviously not the case because there's a solution called Azure Active Directory Domain Services. Anyone using domain services? Anyone heard about domain services? Okay, so a few more. So it's basically Active Directory as a service. You can also think, you can almost think of it as a directory as a service. So it provides those NTLM and Kerberos endpoints. It provides basic domain join capability, group, you can read it there, group policy, LDAP read and LDAP auth, not LDAP write currently, but I guess all of these things are works in progress. So if you have the need to uplift applications that do still rely on those legacy protocols or legacy ways of working, as traditional, maybe let's call it traditional, not legacy, traditional ways of working, then this is a very, very interesting solution and provides a really nice workaround. Obviously, like I said, there are some caveats around not providing LDAP right support, single level OUs, I think currently, although that will likely change. Very basic group policy support as well. But like all good products, it has to have a 1.0 release. So it's now an interesting capability that you can take advantage of. The caveats listed here and understandably on the web page. So it really is, and as a domain controller as a service. And I'm assured by the product manager that there are lots of developments and lots of improvements. Next topic, which was interesting to me because I deal with a lot of customers that want to uplift not only IaaS, but PaaS solutions as well. They want to re-engineer and re-architect for either container-based applications, or they want to use, principally container-based applications. They want to move to .NET Core. They want to, embrace this new world of this new way of working, but obviously have challenges when it comes, or don't have challenges, have the same sort. Well, they do actually. They have the same sorts of challenges when it comes to identity, but they tend to have more scale problems. Where if it's an app, and I've got an example a little bit later on about Real Madrid, when they have their 40 million logins in a 10-minute period, it's a pretty interesting sort of bursty workload. How do you provide the authorization back end, the authentication authorization back end for each of these crazy fans who want to log in right now and see the latest about Real Madrid. So there's been some good progress made, and I don't know do we have any developers in the room? Have you done much work with the identity stack? Not really? Okay. So I guess some of this is good news because some of it is some of the pain that people had to feel. So I'll skip. If you're the only, although we can talk later, of course. But if you're the only person, then maybe I'll skip over this a little bit. But there's been a number of different attempts, and it was mentioned. Someone mentioned earlier. A gentleman mentioned earlier about why do we have to have two accounts? Why do I have to have my Microsoft account, and why do I have to have my Office 365 or Azure Active Directory account? It's history, unfortunately, and the developer story is no different to that. So there was an original current library, ADAL, which supports, it's got good cross-platform support, but it only supports Azure Active Directory, I should say. So there's the slide. No? Did I skip over that? I think I might have a hidden slide. Okay, so there is a story here in a second. ADAL is the underlying library. I'll come back to that one. JavaScript. So do we have any JavaScript developers? No JS developers or any of that? Okay. So I don't know if you've seen anything from Vittorio Bertocci on Channel 9. Yeah. So he lives it. He is a passionate supporter of authentication, authorization, security, and cross-platform. So I mean, he's an ardent supporter of Node.js, and obviously there isn't a JavaScript library for ADAL, and that's Angular-based. There are a number of others. This is a module offering around the core ADAL JS library. They make it look really easy, and it is. So it's an interesting one. So that will then go and use OpenID Connect to you plonk that in, import the right libraries that you need to import, obviously as part of your build. Plonk that in your login page, and away you go. Yeah, so this is the pain that I was mentioning before. So there's some history. Azure AD. There are a number of different attempts at this library, and the original STS, the original security token services that existed in Office 365 still exist in Office 365. New tenants now have moved onto this convergence model. That provides additional capabilities, and tenants are moving across, but obviously people have still developed with the old libraries, and now they need to move across to the new. And then there's another new. There's the new, which is B2C, which again, all Azure Active Directory and IDaaS are a common set of capabilities. So you can imagine the versioning challenges when they have to bring up some. obviously transition from one model to the next. You've probably seen it if you do any sort of development in the SharePoint or Office 365 space. There's been a number of different changes, a number of different attempts and progression, definitely, but also regression in some areas. So the new library is the library to end all libraries, of course, as they all are. Microsoft Authentication Library, MSAL, not Active Directory Authentication Library. And it works with all of the different models. It works with all of those different versions of Azure Active Directory and IDaaS. So that's a good thing, obviously. It's a good thing. This is, based on my previous attempt to log into the right tenant, this is brave in the extreme to try this one on. So they're only in preview, the MSAL libraries, and they're best suited to Azure Active Directory B2C implementations, but that's fast changing. So I guess watch this space. So what I've got is a little application. It's actually anyone know about Xamarin? Yeah, like it? Love it? Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mentioned I worked at Novell. Novell bought it. It was a very exciting time for me because I get excited about those sorts of things. A lot of water's passed under a lot of bridges since then, but now obviously Xamarin and that whole cross-platform .NET is part of the stack, part of the Microsoft stack. So it's very exciting. So it provides, there's a capability called Xamarin Forms, which allows me to write applications once and have significant code reuse. So in actual fact, Xamarin Forms is a cross-platform XACML definition file that allows me to then have common bindings on each of native bindings on each of the applications. So a UI paradigm for one platform can be represented generically and then will be reflected in the application that's built for each of those platforms. So whether it's a back arrow or a back button or a pop-up box that looks the same on, or it looks correct. It has the native look and feel on each of the application platforms. So I built a little application here, which is a Universal Windows application. It's actually backed with user 9-9. This is not a particularly good example because all I'm really doing is logging in with that user. Oh. No, I'm not. Good point. No, I'm not. But if I log in with the right one, oh no. In actual fact, I was wrong because this is actually a B2C account. So, any familiarity with B2C in the room? Azure B2C? Okay. So I should have read my demo script. I'm not going to register with that. I'm going to use BC1. So send verification code. Let's just choose that one. I have no idea where that is, but it looks like it's a Pacific island. So I have an email. It's arrived recently. It's in the wrong time zone because I put the wrong time zone in there. If all goes well, it's pre-release code. If all goes well, I should get the option to log out, which is indicator that I've logged in. And it's one of those annoying task-based applications that then goes and calls a web service and adds a task. A good generic example, but nothing more. I had another really good example on this, but the Xamarin instance on that didn't work in the end. So sadly, it broke. It was working this morning, I assure you. Very quickly, and I'm going to whip through these last few slides around identity and access management. I did mention earlier that we should make some reference to identity and access management, the traditional on-premise identity and access management. If you're licensed for Azure, and I haven't spoken about licensing up to, briefly, maybe you mentioned it once, but I haven't really hammered it. But so if you're licensed for Azure Active Directory Premium or EMS, then you do have access to FIM or MIM as it's now known, I think, ILM, depending on how much experience you have in that space. And you get UserCal, so that provides the portal interface as well for user self-service on-premise and all of those good things. It also has an additional capability about privileged account management, which is another new addition to that suite. So if you are looking for a solution to backfill that, if you've got a hole in that capability at the moment and you are licensed for the other piece, then you get that out of the box, which is a fabulous offer. That wasn't spruiking because it's in the box. So that capability covers synchronization within internal systems. So that's a little less interesting because obviously it's not cloud, so let's not worry. Let's not dwell on that. But if you do have that on-premise authoritative source, Orion, for example, and you want to pull stuff out of Orion and push it into Active Directory and then AAD sync and AAD connect it up, then obviously that's something a path that you do need to tread, and I'm assuming most of you do that already in some way, shape or form, either through custom code or through an additional investment in that space. Not telling you anything you don't already know there. We have seen a bit more interest in this because, like I was talking about before, that need to provide the level of assurance that identities on-premise are actually, the integrity of those identities on-prem are valid, so that the controls, the privileged account management, the controls around who can access the attributes for users, that those attributes are getting placed in the right place in a timely fashion. So when the claims get sent to the applications, it is actually the person and not someone else. So a useful and significant area of investment. Not dwelling on that because we're talking about cloud. I'll skip over that one as well. Azure B2B. So it provides partner capabilities. Principally, there's a lot of overlap. You can see that in most of these slides, there's a significant amount of blocks that are similar, and that's because it is a consolidated suite. It is a universal suite of offerings. This IDaaS solution and these B2B capabilities just draw on the overall IDaaS capabilities. Use cases. So obviously we're talking about B2B. I haven't mentioned actually about consortia. So we see divestitures and mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures. I've seen this used in a number of different ways in a number of different places, and it does provide interesting amounts of control and really does lower the barrier to adoption for those sorts of situations where you have organisations come on for a period of time that need to access your resources and then go away equally so. Or organisations that have a common interest, so consortia-based organisations. Education's a really good example. Government's a really good example where there's a consortia of organisations that have a common interest in providing shared services. So where there's a SaaS provider application and the shared service provider doesn't want to get into the business of managing the end user's passwords, B2B is a really, really good product for that because the password management is still maintained at the individual tenancy level, or even in the case of a federated tenancy, obviously back on-prem as well. So it provides a lot of the benefits and does offload some of the disadvantages in that space. So as I mentioned, government, enterprise, divestitures and mergers, and joint ventures. So in pretty pictures, it looks a little bit like that, where you've got multiple partners that you invite individuals from those partners into your Azure Active Directory instance and then provide them selective access to applications. You can enforce additional controls around where they come from, whether they need to have additional levels of assurance, those sorts of things. So with the conditional access, the MFA pieces, those sorts of things. The second is a consortia-based, where you may have a individual sector. Sector. Then you have multiple agencies that can come on and leave as well. So this is equal a consortia or joint venture. It's a similar sort of model, but you're able to obviously ultimately decide whether people, based on the invite that you send, you can then obviously with automation you can remove those users from within your Azure Active Directory to remove access. So if the consortium member goes away, then you can take their access away as well. Then there's the multi-consortia, so you can your Azure Active Directory and the services that you provide can also be part of multiple B2B implementations as well. So there's sort of no end to this because the identities sit inside of your Azure Active Directory and there's really just a reference stored in the external. It's a really, really good model and allows for a lot of flexibility where there's common interest inside, again, consortia interest, so where there's common interest inside of a group of individual agencies or departments or even sites within multinational organisations, so regions within multinational organisations it can apply to easily as well. There's APIs now, as I mentioned, so there's PowerShell wrapper around an invitation API. The graph piece I mentioned before around Graph API, which is one of those overarching umbrella APIs that's now available and an interface to Azure Active Directory. Invitations is now included in that API set, which is fantastic. And because I'm a glutton for punishment, I'm going to try this one, which is a partner invitation. Well, that wasn't well received, was it? I'll remember that for next time. Maybe I'll just skip it then if that's the case. That's fine. I don't have an issue with that. Okay, so I'll go to this admin top. I'll go and inside of the users, send an invite to my newly created user. No, not that one. That one. And it should recognise that that's an external tenant. And now it gives me the opportunity to send an invite. Please join my consortium. And this can all be automated with the right sort of tools. So there's interfaces and APIs to allow for this to be automated. I will receive a notification that that's been sent. Once it's been sent, I hear a beep in the other window. That's a good sign. There you go. So in this partner tenancy now, I've received an invitation to be able to access that application. So I'll click on and redeem that invitation. A little bit of an explanation screen so they don't freak out too much. Almost there. I love that. I felt better when that came up. So you'll see now that I have a selection here where I can look for the applications that have been made available to the right user and the right tenant. So the Facebook application that I assigned earlier, and now I've got applications that have been provided by that parent, that partner tenant. Nothing at the moment, but let's see if we can go and change that. What are we going to do with that? We're going to add them quickly to an application. Well, that's going to take a little bit long, so we're running short on time. So I'll let that go in the background while we move over to this next. Customer and citizen identity. I mentioned this at least once earlier. Again, that capability map, that IDaaS capability map, and the sorts of capabilities that this product brings. So really self-registration, but again, because it's a common set of capabilities, it provides all of those other pieces as well in the puzzle. Bring your own identity. People have heard of, anyone heard of self-sovereign identity or any of those initiatives? Okay, so I'll explain more about that in the next couple of slides. Azure B2C is a new offering. It's in GA in North America currently, and it provides those at-scale experiences, those customer citizen identity experiences. As I mentioned, that that ridiculous use case for Real Madrid, and it is ridiculous. But apply that equally to massive deployments of identity solutions for citizen, government to citizen type initiatives, education, whole of education solutions, whole of education sector type solutions, and you can see where these sorts of things, where you don't have to go and repurpose your on-premise identity and access management solutions, and I put that up there for that reason. So don't go and repurpose you necessarily go and repurpose, because the sorts of scales we're talking about for those sorts of offerings, might end up looking a little bit more like that. TCO alone generally, predicates the use of cloud services for those types of solutions. Is anyone using B2C currently or familiar with it? Anyone got a use case for it? We'll talk later. No, I'm joking. Yeah, so it's a very, very interesting technology. Obviously, the libraries now are in place to support it from an application development perspective. It's getting and gaining enormous traction. So Kim Cameron is the chief protagonist, I suppose, and he's been an identity stalwart in Microsoft forever, and continues to lead the charge there, and is doing a wonderful job in that space. I had a demo. I'm going to skip this one as well. Privileged accounts, do it because the ASD says to. It's a really good idea. It's on their top. I know they've revised this recently. I haven't got the revised slide, so apologies, but I know they've rejigged this a little bit, but I think it's still 4. I think it's still in the top 5. Sorry? Oh, okay. Well, it's de-emphasised. I skipped over the slides pretty quickly, so it's certainly de-emphasised. No, please do it. Please do it. Everyone's familiar, I'm sure, with the Australian Signals Directorate guidelines, so if you're not, please grab a copy of the deck and click the link that's in the deck. Privileged account access management, that follows on from that. Microsoft, you've got 2 great offerings. So like I've mentioned before, if you're AAD Premium or your EMS and you've got licenses for privileged account management already in MIM, set it up, look at it, pilot it, kick the tyres. Only covers Active Directory, obviously, and Microsoft technologies, but still well and truly better to have some coverage in that space than none. And then Azure Information Protection privileged identity management, I should say, in the cloud, that does a similar sort of thing for cloud identities in Azure Active Directory on the back of the role-based access control initiatives that are in the cloud. Self-sovereign identity, had a video, don't have time for the video. Go and have a look at this. It's on YouTube. It's really, really interesting. It's all the stuff that, given more time, I would have spoken to you about for an hour today. In 2006, and it's sad in a way that we're not having that discussion, or that we didn't have that discussion and sort the sorts of things out that we had the opportunity to sort out 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So, with that in mind, proliferation of identities, yeah. So this is again that whole self-sovereign identity. Some of the challenges existing in the consumer space around digital identity and having to do evidence of identity and reproof and giving up too much information, all those bad things about the identity world, and maybe trying to flip that on its head a little bit. So self-sovereign identity is a relatively new concept backed by blockchain, distributed immutable ledger, Phil. Backed by blockchain. There's some really interesting talks on TED, and in actual fact, only in the last 3 months, there's been a couple that are really interesting in that space. Some of the big players, not all by any stretch of the imagination. So, Estonian e-residency. I'm now an e-resident of Estonia. I don't know why. I don't know. It doesn't actually do much for me, and I think I'm getting my card in the mail. I'm very excited. I ordered it 2 weeks ago. I haven't got it yet, but it does allow me to interact with the Estonian government using a digital identity and an app, and providing that level of control where I control what information I share. They don't hold anything. All they do all they're able to do is look up on a blockchain a public key, and so anything that I attest and anything that I sign, they can validate that it's come from me. And I can be challenged by their services and their servers to say, please provide evidence that you are over 18. I can have someone else notarize that, and I can store that in my digital wallet and then just provide that information as required. So it's a really, really interesting concept about flipping all of that digital identity on its head, where the value obviously is for the service providers, not for the individuals. Not going to do that. Here's my here's my demo of UPort. So UPort is an alpha release, and it's the first, I suppose, production deployment of this. That was me at the Lego store opening the other day. It was very hot. I'd been in the sun for 2 hours. And this is a bit of an insight into where it's storing information. And if anyone's familiar with Ethereum, there's some Ethereum-type terminology in there around gas, which is the cost of fulfilling contracts and those sorts of things, as well as my identity address, my identity on the blockchain, and also off-chain identity, so the IPFS profile there, for example. So the last thing you want to do is, it's quite a costly exercise in terms of processing and money to store a lot of information on the blockchain. You just store references. So if I want to store something like my avatar photo, then I'll store it immutably. So again, it's signed with keys, and there's that level of assurance and that level of immutability about the credentials. But just really have a little bit of a look, see what you think. It's an interesting approach. It's an interesting way of working, backed by a lot of the blockchain work that's going on in the world at the moment. And there's been a few sessions. You're not in that session today, so maybe download both videos or download both presentations at the end. Sorry for rushing. Got a bit caught at the end there. Q&A. Anyone got any questions? Thank you for your attention as well. Yes.
I was wondering with the app restrictions,
Mm.
do they all have to go through the portal? Because what happens if a person accesses the web app directly?
So generally those applications will be federated. So they can still certainly access that application and be redirected back. But you can set certain conditions. So if the applications are federated back to Azure Active Directory, I should say, for example, then that is the control point, that's the choke point. So they need to be federated back to Azure Active Directory, the STS and Azure Active Directory.
So I've been doing some work with Mobile Line recently, and they've got a product called Access,
Mm-hmm.
which is for mobile devices, obviously, that it can restrict based upon your location, based upon other constraints. If you have access to a web app, and they can do it with proper ones that have federation, and they can do it with ones which don't.
So Intune can certainly do that. So if you have Mobile Liners do Intune. If you have an Intune enrolled device, one of the conditions inside of the conditional access piece inside of Azure Active Directory is that the device is compliant. And so all of a sudden it does fall subject to those things, and then the application can have restrictions also. So you can say the device is compliant and the sorts of things. So how was it in doing the enforcement of the application access?
Some kind of local agent that recognises the URL redirects.
Okay.
So, and it also does the single sign-on pass-through for you.
Well, if it's a web-based application, obviously if you're federating back, you're still going back.
Applications as well.
Okay.
So he did a demo for us for Salesforce, and he showed he has access through the official app, but if he uses a third-party Salesforce app, it restricts the access.
Okay, so you can definitely do that with Intune as well, because you can publish applications through Intune just as you would with Mobile Line.
So it becomes a managed app.
Yeah, so it becomes a managed device. Applications are pushed to the device, and then conditions are placed on that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Please.
Can you use Microsoft Authenticator as an authenticator for Azure AD credentials when they come up on iOS? So if you've got a web app that's published to it, rather than putting the username and password every time, is there a feature that's coming in where it can use Authenticator to authenticate?
So at the moment, it depends on the service. So Office 365 is a little bit further ahead than the rest because I guess it's been around for a bit longer. The SaaS provider pieces, I think, is only SMS currently, and maybe email. I think it's actually only SMS at the moment. There is a convergence there. It's not there yet, but it's certainly something that will be possible. Yeah. Office 365, yes, but not the other services. Yeah.
Just the granular authentication. So with Office 365, they use multi-factor authentication. So you showed the SharePoint. So they're going to have a case scenario for executives in a SharePoint environment being able to have general AD authentication with AFS,
Mm-hmm.
but challenge them for two-factor authentication in the corporate section in that SharePoint space.
As in a subsite or something like that.
So can that be done? And also, I have also situations with multi-factor authentication where, for instance, Exchange Online, AWS, and auto discovery, which will
Look, pretty much, I think the message that I've received from the product team when we were talking about Modern Auth is use Modern Auth, and really, that's, that OIDC, that login prompt, it's got to be that, because like you said, otherwise your mileage will vary, and it's the sad part of it. So it's 2013 Modern Auth. I think it's 2013 and above, isn't it, that you need? Yep. Yeah. So I think that the simple answer is that's really the only way. Yeah.
Which is why Defence can't connect to Azure at the moment.
Oh, really?
But with that granular in SharePoint, can you do that with a granular sub-site so that you can have like a port site that does challenge for authentication?
Not that I'm aware of. No, not that I'm familiar with it. I'll take the question away, but
Because the scenario we're going with is two separate tenants, which is horrible. And I don't think
to enforce that rule.
yeah, but I don't think you can sync AD sync to, from two separate source directories into the one event source.
No, everything you read says no. And I've seen it done, and everything I read says no. and there's that. If you don't want to be supported, yeah, sure, go for it. You can certainly talk about that. But so from two different directories into, there's multi-forest support. So are you talking about multiple Office 365 tenancies back to a single directory, or are you talking? Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's no, that bad things happen there. No, that's not good. There's ways of doing it, but no, that URL base is not something that's I've certainly seen. I know that there's significant investment in that space, and they've talked about making it pluggable to basically be able to write your own, and that's not. I don't know whether that's got legs or not, but that would obviously provide. Look, I guess there are some other, because again, it's a suite of solutions. There's some other solutions in the stack that might be able to. They're not GA yet, and they're not public preview yet, but I can think of at least one way to do it.
Because it doesn't have to be native to the Azure
No.
stack. It can be ways in there that works.
Yeah. I can think of one way, definitely, but yeah, sorry, go on.
Have that conversation.
Yeah.
4 minutes to the next speaker.
Absolutely, yeah, sure.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, guys.